Hello, my name is Browyn Desjardin. I am a digital learning coach at St. Stithians Girls Preparatory in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm also an Apple Distinguished Educator class of 2015 and an Apple Professional Learning Specialist. I'm delighted, in collaboration with Lab 9 Pro, to be able to present to you this webinar about using Schoolwork and Apple Classroom. For the purposes of this demonstration, on the left-hand side you will see an iPad that represents the teacher's iPad, and on the right-hand side an iPad that represents the student iPad. You'll notice the two applications we're going to be working with today are Schoolwork, which is the one that has the little orange and white icon that has the globe and the books, and Apple Classroom, which looks like a teacher in front of the whiteboard. On the student device we have the application Schoolwork on the student's device. You'll notice later when we get to it the reason why we don't need Apple Classroom installed on the student device. But we're going to start with Classroom because if you're in an environment where you're not using managed Apple IDs, then you can absolutely use Apple Classroom. The best way to describe Apple Classroom is to think of it like an opportunity to manage your digital school space, your digital classroom, in the same way that you would manage what your students are doing in the classroom if they were using physical books. This Apple Classroom is a way to be able to manage the digital space inside your classroom. You often are in different parts of the classroom while you're teaching, facilitating a process, facilitating a conversation, and you can't always see, it's impossible to see every screen in front of you, of every student's screen. So the digital capabilities to be able to manage your classroom seem overwhelming. And I've had many teachers say, I'm apprehensive to use iPads in my classroom because I'm always worried about what my students are going to be doing and how do I control what they're doing and how do I manage it and make sure they're all on the same page at the same time. So I'm delighted to be able to tell you that Apple Classroom will solve this problem for you, whether or not you're an institution using managed Apple IDs or not. One plus as well is that Apple Classroom is an app that only the teacher needs to have. The student does not have to have Apple Classroom. And we as a school have made it a policy where we require that when a teacher is using iPads in a class teaching, that they have to use Apple Classroom. It is essential in the same way that you would. Good classroom management requires knowing what your students are doing and where they are and being able to navigate those conversations and have make sure that they're all on task. Apple Classroom enables you to be able to do this. It's very simple. Download the app. It is free to download from the App Store and it looks like this. Tap on it to open it. You simply create a new class by tapping on the plus sign at the top. And you can set up a brand new class and you can call it, for this purpose I'm going to call this one demo class. I'm going to choose a location, St. Stithians College, because I have a managed Apple ID set up in my space, but you would be able to set it up when you create yours. Yours would be a different location. I'm going to make this one a pen and I'm going to use a different color like a blue and tap done. Right, my class has now been created. I tap on it to open it when my students come into my classroom. And I tap add students. Now because I am signed into an institution and I have all the students' names, I can now go in and add students manually. I can go and search for them. And in this case, I'm going to add in this particular student for the purposes of this demonstration. This iPad here on the right hand side, the student iPad, is listed as a 5F001 demo student, and I'm going to select them and I'm going to add that student into that class. Now you'll notice that because I have the demo student 5F0001 online on the right hand side on this iPad where I'm moving the cursor now, that I can see that that student is within Bluetooth range of me, and that's how Apple Classroom works. The students have to be within Bluetooth range of their teacher in order to be able to use this system. And that is a benefit because when we explain to our students No, we are not monitoring your devices 24/7. When you go home, you are not still being monitored by the teacher. It works when you're within Bluetooth range and the teacher has opened up that specific Apple Classroom space. All right, and those students that are within Bluetooth range, when the teacher has opened up that classroom space, the teacher will be able to see those students' devices appear if they're within Bluetooth range and they are online. So we can see that 5F0001 is on at the moment, and I can see that that student's device is being AirPlayed because it's connected to this computer. And I can now, if I go up to the top, we're going to work through these icons, which are very, very powerful and may allow you to do the most amazing things. So the first thing you want to do is, obviously you're somewhere in the classroom, you can't see every student's screen. This set of binoculars here, if you tap on screens, will allow you to see the student's screen. And if you use the simple pushing out with your fingers on your iPad, you'll be able to zoom in and see what that student is doing. So if I'm the student and I'm moving on the right hand side, you'll see that everything I do on my iPad, on the student's iPad on the right, reflects on the teacher's iPad inside Apple Classroom. So recently we had students writing a summative assessment, and we said to them they had to be in a specific application inside the iPad, and the teacher had projected their Apple Classroom, this screen, up onto the display for the whole class to see, and then the teacher was able to see when students were going off task and if they moved out of that specific space. So you're able to use it as a way of monitoring what the students are doing and which applications they're in and what screen they're looking at. So for example, if the student device went in and opened up another application or something, if they went into a website, for example, immediately on the left hand side, that teacher would see that the student had now gone into a website and would be able to zoom in and see exactly what that student is doing. And if they tap on it, they tap on the student's screen icon, they'd be able to do a number of things, like navigate to open them into a specific application, lock their screen, AirPlay what is on their screen at the moment, and then tap view screen would bring up the actual live copy of what is going on that student's device. And the student will know that that teacher is looking at their page, because they'll be able to see this little blue notification that the teacher is now looking at their screen. Right, so as I said, when the student has got something open on their iPad, like I have on the right hand side on the student's device, anywhere I go, the teacher's getting immediate feedback to know what that student is doing. You'll notice the other student in my class is currently offline, but I'm able to see what the student that is in the room and within Bluetooth range and online is currently doing. The open icon on the top on the left hand side, if I tap open, I can navigate those students to specific applications. Now with SchoolKit, which is a code that developers are able to, Apple has allowed them to include within their code when they create apps, it allows them to integrate directly into Apple Schoolwork and into Apple Classroom. And if you have a look, some of those apps include Edpuzzle, 3D Calculator, Kahoot, and so on. And one of the options here at the bottom, you'll see it says lock in app after opening. So if I choose and I decide, obviously the application I want the student to have open must be downloaded and on the student's iPad. I can't expect a student's iPad to open to an application that student does not have installed on their iPad already. So for example, if I go in now and I choose Kahoot, tap on I want you to lock them into that app and tap Kahoot, then that student is now locked inside this application. All right. And if the student tries to go anywhere else, right, they can't, even if they press the home button, but the student cannot go anywhere else. They are locked inside that application. So you can literally lock students into a specific app and they may not go anywhere else, which is incredible. Gives you the ability to really get a lockdown on any opportunities for students to go and misbehave. And if they do and you decide not to lock them in, well, then you can have the conversation with students afterwards. Right, tap done. And now I can do something else. I can decide I want them to go into something else, and this time I'm not going to lock them in. I could send them to maps, for example. Right, and choose maps. And it is going to open apps and maps and then take the student to maps on their iPad. So just think about the possibilities for this application for you as a teacher, because now you're able to navigate students, and you won't have, especially in the younger primary school environment, and to some degree in the senior, when they're going, which app, ma'am, which app, sir, I don't know where I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to be doing. This really gives you an opportunity to help navigate students to where they need to be and maximize the amount of time that is spent in actually learning and doing that specific task, as opposed to wasting time trying to get a lockdown on the tech. And that is the whole purpose, in my opinion. I do believe that teachers should not have to be the whole, have the tech skills to be able to solve every problem a student is having in a classroom. We need to give teachers time to be able to focus on what they're good at, getting teaching done, and really having students benefit from the time spent inside their classrooms. And this is what this application allows you to do. And if you choose so that is the open when you're opening the students up to a specific application. If I tap navigate, I'm able to navigate students to specific things. So for example, if I go to books, it opens up a list of the books that I have available, and obviously I'm going to have to choose something that I know that the students currently have. And if I go down and find a book that I know that they have, let's choose Everyone Can Create Music, and then it opens up the book, and it even goes down to the content. So I can say, you know what, I want them to go to a specific place, and that is the introduction, and it opens up the book for the student on their page, right, and takes them directly to the page I want them to be on inside that book. I mean, just think about the capabilities of this. So you're not only navigating them to a specific application and place, but you're actually taking them inside that application to a specific space, a specific activity within that application. Now, obviously, this only exists within applications that run SchoolKit, and there are more and more of them coming out all the time. As it is, there are quite a few of them available. So as I said, the student has now had the iPad open to that specific place within that specific book. The options for that is navigate. If I tap hide, all right, and I tap done, what it has done now, it has hidden the apps and it's taken them back to the home page. So effectively you're taking them back to the home screen on the iPad. And now let's have a look at one of the other icons. So if we go to lock, and this is a favorite one with teachers, because when you want to get your students' attention, if you tap lock, immediately it's going to lock all the iPads. If you want to lock the screens, you want to lock the whole class, you would tap lock and would tap the whole class's iPads, all right? So then you would tap lock, and it's going to say at the top there, all right? And it's locked all the iPads. Then you can, in the same manner, unlock all the iPads, all right? And if I tap on a specific student, all right, it brings up the menu for that specific student. I know that because at the top it's got the 5F0001. That is that specific student. And I can say I want you to lock that specific student's device. It'll only lock that student's device. The student gets the notification that the iPad has been locked by the teacher, and then they can have the conversation. Sir, ma'am, why did you lock my device? Or you can walk up to them and say, listen, there's a reason I locked your device. Or perhaps you want your students to all just look up. That is the quickest way to get their attention, is to just lock the screens. Mute is a really important one. I don't know about you, but when you have a lot of students in the classroom and they're all listening to, say, the gaming music from Kahoot or something, that can become a cacophony of noise for everybody in the space. So it is a great option to be able to mute all the students' devices if you need to. Then there is the grouping function. Very, very valuable, the grouping function. If you tap group, you're able to, if you have more than one student within the class, you can create a group, and you can say, for example, reading. If I create a reading group here, and I can then assign specific students to be in the reading group, and you can see that I've ticked that student, and I can tick this student and say I want those two students. However many students you had in that class, the little devices would show up here. You'd be able to select them and say they're part of the reading group. Then effectively what you can do is navigate to that specific group, and you'll be able to, when you tap done, you can then assign them a specific task by navigating them to a specific thing that you want them to do. So you would open up the group, like you can see it here. If I go to all devices, I'm going to see all. You'll see the little arrows pointing. If I go to reading group, it'll show me all the students that I have assigned to that reading group, and I will then be able to navigate them to the book that I want them to read. And then I could create another group for, say, a pages task, a workbook that they're going to work through, and then I'd be able to give that group a name. So a nice way of doing this in terms of inclusion, in terms of thinking about the role that you play as a teacher and thinking about the needs of your students. Often students get quite self-conscious when they think that they're being made to do something different to everyone else, and it is very obvious to the students in class that a student is doing something different. Here, by doing this, by using Apple Classroom, you can put students that you know need extra help with a task, or if you know that there's students who need to be extended, you can put them into specific groups, give those groups names that you decide on, and you can place their devices inside those groups so that when you assign them tasks, they've got tasks to do. In the same way that you could also have students when they would normally physically move around the classroom to go into different do different things, like you might have one sit in a corner and read a book, and then they move and they do an experiment somewhere else and whatever. You could in the same way have groups set up, and you have them working inside a group doing a specific task for a specific amount of time. So you could create the groups and then just assign them the tasks within the Apple Classroom app, and then you just be able to say, right, I want this student to do this, I need that student to do that. So if a student needs extension work or support work, you're able to help them and meet them where they need. So think about how that personalizes a learning experience, even though as far as the students are concerned, they're all sitting with iPads in the classroom. As far as the teacher's concerned, they know that they're giving each student what that student needs at that specific time. So if you've got a student who was absent, say, and needs to go through some of the work, you would be able to say, right, I've got an absent group, and I'm going to put those students that were absent into that group, and I'm going to assign them a different task. So you say, take out your iPads, the work you need to do will appear on your screen. Boom. I mean, how wonderful is that, right? It is no better way of being able to navigate students and get them on task very quickly and maximize the time that you have, the contact time that you have with your students. And then being able to go in and monitor and see what a student is doing, and be able to then see something they're doing on their screen, be able to lock their screen, or be able to navigate them somewhere else, or be able to physically walk up to them and say, I see that you're on this task, is there a reason that you're here, how can I support you? So Apple Classroom is incredibly powerful, but it doesn't just end there. When I finish the class, right, and the class is finished, the class are leaving now, physically going somewhere else, I tap on end class, and it gives me incredibly powerful information. It shows me how many students were in that class, and it shows me which applications were opened during that class. And I could take a screenshot of this, right, for later reference, and I could date it. And then if I go to specific students, it actually shows me during that classroom time how many minutes they spent within that app, within the different applications. So if you look at the information that it's going to give you compared to other students, you might have a student who is, say, they're getting bored in class, let's say, for example, and you're able to pull up this information and you see that they are spending a very small amount of time inside one application where the work is sitting, but they're completing the task, and then they're going somewhere else because they're getting bored. You'd be able to see which apps they had open. Then you'd know, goodness, maybe this student needs some extension activities, and you'll be able to call that student in, and also use this to frame parent conversations about student performance, and say, look, when the rest of the class were doing X, Y, and Z inside this app and spent 10-15 minutes inside the app, your son or daughter spent 2 minutes inside the application. This shows me that either they're not focused, depending on the results obviously, or they need some extension work. So it can frame really powerful, valuable conversations about how we spend our time how students are spending their time, and it can allow you to think about what kind of work you need to be planning and doing within your class for your different students. Again, personalizing their learning experience. Because think about in the physical world with books, when the students left the classroom, they'd close their book and leave, you didn't know which page they were on, how much time they were spending inside, working. You could just guess based on an assignment that would be handed in a week later or the next day. Now, Apple Classroom allows you to immediately get that feedback and then use that as information to be able to provide what your students need and meet them where they are, and just be a better informed teacher when you're providing feedback and giving students a personalized experience in terms of their learning journey. And so that is essentially Apple Classroom. And the rest of the classes that you see set up inside here are all fed back from Schoolwork. So any class that I add now will appear inside Schoolwork as it feeds back into the Apple School Manager. To understand the technical side, you get the support of your IT department, or one of your Lab 9 could assist you with this. Again, Lab 9 Pro would be great to be able to help you with this. And you could get this up and running very quickly. Once it's done and it's set up, it's really very, very easy for you to get going. So you'll notice I've got a few classes up and open right now. And so when the students move out of my physical space into another class and I get a new class coming in, I'd simply again tap and open the class that was coming in, and I'd have their names, and when they were online they'd immediately appear and I would just go straight into it. So this for us as a school has resolved a lot of issues. It has certainly informed really valuable conversations with students, with parents, with other teachers, when we compare what's happening in one class versus another, one subject versus another. It has allowed us to be able to group students and get them to work on different concepts within groups. Even though they might not physically be sitting next to each other, they can still work on this task together. It has allowed us to save time in terms of getting students to be where they need to be to get the work done. And I think that's been exceptionally valuable. So we try to make students understand this is not a monitoring tool. This is not a tool to, I'm spying on you and I want to know what you're doing on your device all the time. No, this is more about, I want to give you what you need, and I want to help you learn about the behavior that you are demonstrating when you use a device. Because you want to get them to be the best they can be. And as a teacher, helping them inform decisions they make, like which apps they're on and how long they spend on a task, is really important information to be able to say, well, you didn't do so well, but you only spent 5 minutes on this, whereas everybody else spent 10 minutes on it. So maybe you rushed through it. And then they can see how they compare, to other students in terms of making that inform some of the decisions that they're making. Because clearly, if a student is rushing through something and doing really well, then you need to adjust the work for that student and actually say to them, look, I think we need to extend you. You seem to have grasped this really well. And for those students that are struggling a little bit, you'd be able to give them support work for them to be able to work on during class. And it's incredibly powerful, and we are finding that it is very useful. It has saved a lot of our teachers a lot of stress in terms of them not knowing what students were doing when they were on their devices, because they said when they would physically move towards them, the child would suddenly press the home button and then they knew that the child was probably not on the task they were meant to be on, because as a teacher you can't see the front of every screen all the time. Well, here we go with Apple Classroom, you can see every screen all the time. So yes, you could use it as a management tool. And like I said at the beginning with one of our examples of locking them into a specific app because they were doing a summative assessment, it's that kind of thing. It's how you're going to use it. But Apple Classroom will meet you where you are and meet your students where they are and give you both what you need. And then you're able to navigate and manage your digital classroom within your physical classroom. And I think that is what is really important. It's about managing your classroom, and good teachers manage their classrooms. For the purposes of those people who do not use managed Apple IDs, I wanted to demonstrate Classroom for those teachers. So if you open up Classroom for the first time, you get this lovely little invitation and tap Continue, and then put in your teacher information. You can also then put in an image of yourself if you wanted to. And then you tap create class. Again, I'm not signed in to a managed Apple ID. Give my class a name, call it demo, and I'm going to leave it with the book. But you could change the color and the name and everything and give it a description. Tap done. Then I open up the class and I get this little notification, and I tap allow and I tap invite students. All right. You can then use the option to AirPlay that class code to your projector in your classroom so that the whole class can see. In this case, for the demonstration, I'm not doing that. Now, the student does not need to have Apple Classroom installed on their device. They simply tap the settings button, and when they do that, they'll notice that Apple Classroom will come up as one of the options for them to join. They'll see Classroom, as you can see on the left-hand side here. They'll be able to see Classroom appear. Tap on Classroom, and they'll see a list of classes that have been created that they are within Bluetooth range of. And in this case, the class that I've added here is called Demo, and I tap to add Demo. I can then put in the code that the teacher has AirPlayed or provided me with. In this case, the code is 3688. 3688. Remember, the student has to be within Bluetooth range, and I tap add. The teacher then sees that student has now appeared on their screen. You'll see here, I can see that student has appeared, and I can then, if I see a student who's trying to join who might be within Bluetooth range but I don't want them in the class, I can tap on them to not add them, or tap on them to get the tick to add, and then I simply tap add, and now that student is part of that class. Right, and so I will then be able to do the same things that I could before. If I go on to view the screens, I can see that student's screen come up because we're both within Bluetooth range of each other on the same Wi-Fi network. And I'll be able to then go in and see that student's screen, and that student gets a notification whether they want that teacher to allow. This does not happen in managed Apple IDs because the managed Apple ID is owned by the school, so that gives that school and that teacher permission to be able to see the screens. So when you're using it within a space of a non-managed Apple ID environment, then you can tell the students, please always give me permission. All right, and I get that notification. I'm going to tap always allow, and now the teacher can see that student's screen. All right, and then they've got the same functionality of being able to navigate them into different applications, lock the screen, and open up specific apps, put them in a group, and so on. Now, the rest of it operates exactly the same way as I demonstrated in the managed Apple ID environment, but the only difference is that the students will have to put in a code, and the students will have to give that teacher permission to be able to view their screens. You can also then invite other students who might walk in. So the managed Apple ID works differently in the sense that the class, you'll have all your students because all those accounts are sitting within Apple School Manager. In the space of non-managed Apple ID environment, then you're able to just run it using the codes. And I often give a tip to our parents where I say to them, why don't you use Classroom within your home environment, and then you're able to manage and navigate children to see what they're busy doing on their screens. Very valuable. In the same way, when I tap end class, I end the class and I'm able to see what that student was doing. So next I will be hopping into Schoolwork, and I look forward to showing you what Schoolwork is capable of doing, but I would highly recommend you explore Apple Classroom. Very easy to use. I'd like to demonstrate what would happen if you open up Schoolwork and you're not signed into your school managed Apple ID. You will get this error. This means that the account, the iCloud account that you are signed in with, is not a managed Apple ID. As I said before, you have to be signed in on a managed Apple ID to be able to use Schoolwork. So if you get this error, speak to Lab 9 or your IT department and find out what it is that you're doing wrong in terms of which is your managed Apple ID, and get your school on board with using Managed Apple ID so that you can sign in on your iCloud with your Managed Apple ID and have this work. And the reason for this is to keep student data, sensitive student data, privacy, all those things. It's to keep it in line with GDPR requirements, and it is actually there to protect you and to protect your students. One thing I need to make you understand at the get-go is that to use Schoolwork, you have to be using Managed Apple IDs in your environment. So unlike Apple Classroom, where you can use Apple Classroom without Managed Apple IDs, Schoolwork requires that all students and teachers are using Managed Apple IDs. And in order to know more about this, please reach out to Lab 9 Pro or reach out to any of your local IT department people who can assist you with setting it up. Once it's set up, it's very easy to use, and I look forward to showing you how it is used. So to use Schoolwork, both the teacher and the student need to have the app installed on the iPad. And if you're using Managed Apple IDs and using a mobile device management system, then it is possible to have this application pushed through using your MDM. So Schoolwork will look like the little orange and white icon has a globe and the books. So you'll see it on both the teacher and the student's device. When the teacher opens up Schoolwork, they get a list of all the classes that they might have created and favorite content that they might have inside the library and any imports that they might have inside as well. And then the most recent. In this case, I haven't looked at anything right now, most recent handouts. But if I go to students, you'll see that the classes have been pulled through from Apple Classroom, right? So when they are created, when you have a class created, everything syncs through to Apple School Manager, where it then filters through to Apple Classroom, and what is in Apple Classroom will filter and reflect in Schoolwork, so they talk to each other, right? So when the student opens up Schoolwork for the first time, they'll get a little notification telling them what is possible to see inside Schoolwork. So within the calendar space, we can see what is due and focus on what they need to have completed within the time frame. They can share their work through Cloud or AirDrop, and they can check their progress using the student page to be able to see what work they've completed and see their progress within their apps. So then they tap Start Learning Now. The first time a teacher opens up a Schoolwork app, they're provided with some information about personalizing learning and sending a handout to a single student or an entire class based on the student's needs. They're able to guide students within apps and direct students to specific activities within apps, and collaborate with them and create handouts. You're able to review student progress and provide instant feedback and focus on teaching and let Schoolwork help you focus on the students. So essentially that's a really great point that they make there in terms of what both Classroom and Schoolwork do at the end of the day is allow the teacher to focus on helping students. And then Schoolwork and Classroom take care of the nitty-gritty, getting the work to students, getting it back from students, and navigating them to where you need them to be to personalize the learning process so that the teacher can just focus on what needs to be done. Right, so you'll notice that in general the look and feel is about the same when you compare the teacher's version on the left to the students on the right. But the difference is that when a teacher is tapping on handouts, they're able to see all the classes that they have created, and the student will see all the classes that they're a member of on the left. All right. When the teacher has got the option to look at students, whereas the student is just seeing their own specific work. So a teacher can go in and see specific students listed, and then they can see any notifications when they tap on that student. They'll be able to see things that have been submitted, things that are due, things that are completed. All right. And there's the difference: completed and due. Right. We'll start off with the teacher side of it, and then we'll move across into the student side of looking at things. But just quickly to run through what the student sees. The student sees a list of things that are due from the most urgently required due, and then to the ones that are due later. And then they're able to tap on those specific things and go and see those handouts and get that data and information in terms of which apps are required to do that activity and to do that work, and how far they've got in terms of their work, how many things are completed, what percentage of the work that they have completed. And when we go into the teacher's view and we look at those specific students, we can then go and have a look and see specific handouts. So if you look at the work we're looking at here, the task is a geography task called pandemic. If we go into due and we look at the task that we're looking at, which will be pandemic, there it is, geography pandemic, you can see that we can tap view handout and we can go down and see the student's progress. And there is the student, right? So this is the teacher's view of the same work that we're seeing on the student side. This is that specific student 5F0001 that we're using as a demo. And I can then go in as a teacher and I can see that I've got 2 items ready for review. And I tap on those activities and I can see that no progress has been recorded for one and no progress for the other. And I'm able to go in and have a look at different items and see what has been done and what has not been done. When it comes to the student progress, every student that will have been assigned that task will be listed underneath that specific handout. So that assignment that has been put there, this pandemic, assigned on the 24th of August, I'm able to go in and see, I'd see all the students here. So for this demo, I've just got one student in this class, but if I decided to more than one student, I would see all those students listed here and I would be able to go in and have a look at that work. And if I felt that the work had not been done successfully or needed to be tried again, if I tap on those ellipses, those 3 little dots, I'm able to say tap on ask to try again, and that student will get a notification to try that work again. I can also send the student a message. So if I tap on send a message, I can send the student a message saying, do you need assistance with this task? Right, and send that, and then the student will get a notification from the teacher. You'll see it's come up here that they have been sent a message, and they can then reply to the teacher saying whether or not they need help. I'm okay, and the teacher will get a response from that student. Right, and so extremely powerful application. Schoolwork and messages integrated the way that it is. So let's go to when we're setting up a brand new class, or we want to create a new assessment, a new assignment and handouts. These are the 2 icons that we use in Schoolwork. On the top right hand corner you'll see them. The little one with the people is very clear that when you tap on it, it is to create a new class. Now a class that you create here will automatically through Apple School Manager filter through to Apple Classroom when you're using, because you're using Managed Apple IDs when you're using Schoolwork. So if I create a class here, that class will reflect in Apple Classroom. So when I open Classroom, I will see those classes there. Just to show you what I'm talking about, if I go into Classroom, I can see all my classes here. So any class that I create inside Schoolwork will reflect inside Apple Classroom. Alright, so we don't want to create a class unless we need one, and if you have a class already, then we can just go into setting some handouts and assignments and creating the work that we want done. And to do that, we tap on the little icon that looks like a lot of little pages on top of one another. So we tap on that and it says new handout. So you can then tap on where it says to, and immediately it comes up with a list of all the classes that you have created. Remember, these classes filter through to Apple Classroom as well. So in this case, I'm going to math class, and I want, it then prompts me and says, who in the math class? Do you want the whole of your math class, everyone inside that math class, or do you want specific students? So think about the power of this. When we're talking about Apple Classroom, we're talking about giving students what they need. Here's another example of how that works. If you're wanting to create a handout that is for specific students who you know need support and additional work, or if there are students that you know need extension work, this is where you can do this, because the student will only receive what is applicable to them. So it's not like where you're handing out and you're saying in a class, certain students must only pick up a worksheet, or the students visibly see a teacher handing out a worksheet to certain students and not to others, then it becomes obvious that there is a difference between them. So you're able to negate those issues and create a personalized space that is safe and inclusive at the same time. So a student will open up their iPad, they won't be distracted by the things that are not applicable to them, because when they go to schoolwork, they will see the work that is only relevant for them and nothing else, so they don't get distracted. At the same time, if there are students that need extension work or students that need support, you're able to give them that without making it noticeable to other students, so that they feel safe within that working space. So in this case, if I select math, it's going to automatically tick all the students. For this demo class, I've only got one student in that class, and I tap done. I'm then able to give that handout a name. So I can say fractions intro. And then I can set a deadline. If we turn off the deadline option, then it doesn't give us a date. If I turn it on, toggle it on, I can then immediately change that date by tapping on where it said tomorrow, and I can select a different date. All right, and then it says, right, what do you want to have within that handout? Are we going to have an app activity? Are we going to put files? Are we going to put photos and videos? Are we going to scan a document? All those worksheets that you have printed, don't worry about it. You can literally use the scan document feature and scan those worksheets to include them as part of that handout. So you're not losing all of that work. And then when you do that, it creates a digital PDF copy of it, so that you're then able to take that PDF and students are able to annotate it. So immediately by digitizing it and turning it into a PDF, it then becomes something that can be used again and again and can be annotated and used very powerfully, as opposed to just a printed worksheet. And then you can incorporate links and the hand-in request. People often say, well, why do we need a hand-in request versus the other thing? So when the task is a specific, say, document PDF that you've scanned, or a file that you're including, or an app activity, the app itself has got the, let's say it's a Kahoot, then the Kahoot quiz will have been completed and you'll get the notification that it's been completed. Whereas when it might be a task where you're wanting them to create something, and they're not going in through a third-party application, then you could include the option to hand in. So you say, I want you, in addition to those links and scanning of scanned documents and any videos and photos and things that I might have and app activities, in addition to that, I also want you to hand in something else that you will have created from scratch, right? So let's start with the first one on the left. If we tap app activity, I can then specify specific apps. I'd like to demonstrate how to add an app activity to a handout. So when we open up the handouts and we decide we want to select the class that we want to give this handout to and tap done, and we're going to give the handout a title. Incidentally, this is an older version of Schoolwork that I'm currently using here, so you'll notice a difference when I shift between them. And I'm going to call this fractions, and then I can choose whether or not I want to set a deadline. And I am going to make it the 30th of November. And then I go in and tap add activity, and I tap on the apps option. And in this case, when you go to the apps, you can actually navigate to specific apps that have ClassKit built within them. And the advantage of this is that when you navigate to that specific app, right, for example, Kahoot, you can pick a specific Kahoot that once you've signed in with your Kahoot account, right? So you will have had the Kahoot app on your iPad or on the device, and you will have opened Kahoot and signed in with that account, so it recognizes who you are and which Kahoot quizzes you have available, and then you can simply choose the Kahoot that you want the students to do and select it. And it not only adds the Kahoot app activity, but it adds the specific Kahoot quiz you're wanting to do, right? So if you tap the little eye information, it gives you the option to open it and have a look and see what that Kahoot looks like. Alright, let's go back to that. If I can add another app activity, right? If I tap on apps, and this time I want to add a book, and I can give specific books that I want them to look at, alright? And if I add an activity and it's an app, I can also go to a specific Nearpod and say I want them to do a specific activity. Let's say it's 2D shapes, and that's the one I want them to do. You'll see it navigated with a specific code, and then when I'm done I tap post, and that activity will now, that handout will now appear inside the student's device. I've got a notification as a student that a new handout is available. If I tap on it, it navigates me directly to that specific activity, and I'm able to see which activities are now have been given to me in those handouts. And you'll notice when I tap on the Kahoot, it's that specific Kahoot quiz called Marco Polo, and I'm able to then start that specific quiz. And if I tap on the Nearpod, it's a specific Nearpod activity that I'm directed to, not Nearpod in general. So anyone who's used iTunes U in the past will recognize a distinct difference here, because when you put an app activity inside iTunes U, you had to put in the Nearpod code, or you have to say open the quiz called, or give them a quiz code, whereas now it directs them directly to the specific activity within that app that you have assigned in a handout using Schoolwork. And it is incredibly powerful, because yet again we're focusing on teachers doing the teaching and students doing the activities, and not wasting time trying to navigate people and students to specific things. Here we have the teacher's iPad, and we've created that activity where we had the fractions and we put in the apps that we wanted to navigate students to specific tasks within those apps. And now we decide, you know what, we actually want to add some other elements to the specific handout. It's a simple matter of, inside your Schoolwork app, navigate to the handout and then tap on the ellipses, the 3 dots, and tap edit. It brings up the handout, and at this point, if you wanted to, you could change the due date, and you could then go in and add further app activities. And in this case, I'm going to show you where we can add files. So if you tap on files, you can then navigate to specific files that you want to attach to that handout. In this case, I'm going to choose the app design, and then we can also go in and say we want to attach specific photos, and you can go in and attach photos that you want them to look at, or video content. You can then go in and scan a document. So if I tapped on scan document, I would be able to go in and use my camera to scan in a document that would allow me to turn that into, because it's a PDF, I would be able to then annotate that document. For specific links, you could then go in and choose a bookmark or a web page that you might have, and you could then choose that as it you wanted to add as a link. You could then tap on hand in request, and the hand in request would bring up this student work that you're wanting them to submit, and you could rename that and say you wanted it to have a specific name. You could say call it demo, right? And then you're done. Now you'll notice you've got a whole lot of different items that are attached to that handout, and what is nice here is that if you go onto the little hamburger or hot dog icon that some people refer to it, the 3 lines, if you tap and hold those, you can reshuffle those into a specific order. So if you wanted to go in and you wanted them to go in a specific order and look at, say, do the Nearpod quiz first, then you could move that Nearpod activity into the first position, and then wanted them to do the Kahoot, and then you wanted them to look at the book, and then they could do the app design, or perhaps you want them to look at the photograph. You can navigate them to the photograph because you wanted that to be their provocation, and you could tap in and you could rename that photograph, and you could actually call it provocation. Alright, and then you can go in and rename different items here. When it comes to the document, so here I've got a PDF document. If I go in and I add, so if I tap on the little I next to it, you'll see that for documents, this is a very powerful tool. If you tap on the little inspector tool, the little I next to it, you've got here at the moment, every student will get their own copy of that file, so they can then annotate it and do it. If you wanted that only the teacher can make changes, then you could do that there. When it comes to adding a file that is a specific Pages document, Pages allows you for even more flexibility. So if I was to choose one of these documents and I added this as the document, right, so what I've done now is I have added a Pages document to the handout, and if I tap on the little inspector tool, there are now 3 options available to me for that specific item. I can have each student edit their own file, so each student gets their own copy and treats it like it's their own work, or I can have students collaborate together on the same file. So that is the power of collaboration when it comes to iCloud and using managed Apple IDs and using iCloud. And then there's the only you can make changes. So if I want them to just look at it, but only the teacher can make the changes, understand that that is a living, breathing file, in the sense that if I as a teacher now go and change something about that file, the students will then get a copy of that file, right? Each student gets their own copy. The student will edit their own copy, and I will be able to see those changes reflected. And in the same way, if the students collaborate together on the file, then the students, when they're working on it, will all be working on the same copy of the same document. When I'm ready and I've decided I've got enough information in here, I could go in and add some instructions. Please look at the provocation image, comma, read through the Pages document and complete the tasks in the order given below, full stop, enjoy, exclamation mark. Then when I'm happy with my task, I have the instructions, I have all the relevant activities and attachments that I want to the handout. I then simply tap on that share button, and the student will get a notification that there has been changes to that handout, or they'll receive a notification that there is a new handout, and they will then be able to work through that task. So those changes are now reflecting across onto the student's device, and now the student is able to go in and work on that document. So if the student opens up that handout, they're able to read the instructions, and they can now go and they'll see the items that they have not done are marked with little red dots. So if we go into the remote learning document that I mentioned, and I open up that remote learning document, immediately it gives the student's name at the top of the document. All right, so let's have a look at what that means for a teacher. When you assign a handout and you put in a Pages document in files within that handout within Schoolwork, when the teacher goes into their Files application, right, opens up the Files app, and they go down into iCloud Drive, they'll notice there is a new folder entitled Schoolwork, right? So when you tap on Schoolwork and you open it up, you'll see the names of all the classes that were created within Schoolwork, and one of them is this demo class. And if I go and I tap on demo class, I can see the handout that I created, that one called fractions. Tap on fractions and open it up, and it immediately gives me a copy of each document that a student can work on, and immediately gives me the student's name. So there's going to be no more handing in of work where you don't know to whom that document belongs, because Schoolwork immediately through the managed Apple ID is able to know whose work is whose, so that the teacher can open up the folder, the files folder in the Files app, and be able to find that document for that specific student. The student is not having to name it because it's already named for that student. So you can see now that for the specific student GP5F0001, I have a copy of that remote learning document, the same one the students got open up here, that now has a submit button on the top right hand corner of it that automatically appears, because it's recognizing that that Pages document has been shared through Schoolwork, and there's an expectation that that work would be handed in when it's complete. A teacher can now go in and open up that very specific Pages document the copy belonging to this specific student. Now, what is the power in that? Well, it is huge. I mean, just think about it. Normally, you would have had to wait for a student to hand in work before you can comment. But because of the way that this interface works, the way that Schoolwork operates. I can see a live, up-to-date copy of students' work and send them notes and instructions and give them feedback while they're working on it before they submit it for assessment. So if I notice, for example, as a teacher, there are moments when you've handed something to a student and the expectation is they'll get it in by a certain date, and then students hand in the work and some haven't done it and some have done it and some have gone off on a tangent and gone on the wrong direction and they've clearly misunderstood the instructions. In that certain scenario, you've had to wait for students to hand in all their work before you can pick up on where they have misinterpreted something or they've not been staying on task. Because of the power of schoolwork, right, you're able to go in and give them feedback before they hand it in. In other words, you're able to almost be a little teacher on the shoulder of the student, supporting them and guiding them, personalizing that learning process, that learning path, so that they're getting immediate up-to-date feedback when you're in a position to give it. So now I can go in and I could go in and say, right, I'm going to give a comment to the student. I'm going to say something like, have a look at this introduction, right? I could also go in and add in a voice note and give them actual verbal instructions, for example, okay? So I could go in and record some audio for them. I hope you're enjoying this task. If you get stuck, don't forget to come and ask me. And I could tap insert and place this little note here and just highlight it for the student to say, play me, okay? And then I tap done, okay? That now, look what's happening on the student's document, live, right? So that student hasn't tapped submit yet, but is getting feedback from their teacher when they need it, right? So it's not waiting until it's too late and the submission date has come and gone and the time has gone by, that precious time that we lose in our teaching and learning spaces. You're able to give that live, personalized feedback to that student. So now in this situation, you could be sitting on a playing field, in a park, at home, you could be in your classroom somewhere, and then you notice that a student has sort of not understood the instructions, is maybe doing something, then you need to give them a little bit more guidance, or you just want to give them a friendly, hey, how are you doing? Are you coping? Remember, I'm here if you need support, because you notice they haven't done any work, or maybe that student's absent, you just want to pop in and sort of give them some little feedback. You can do that, right? And that student is able to see that live. So the student can now open up the document and they can go in and hear the message from their teacher. So that is the power of using Schoolwork. For me, that is a game changer, because that is something that pen and paper cannot do. In a pen and paper environment, I would have had to wait for that student to hand in some work before I could comment on it, all right? And I would not be able to leave an audio note for that student or a video note for that student within that document. So there's that live feedback interactivity between the student's copy of a document and what the teacher is able to then provide in terms of support to that student. And when the student's done and finished all their work, they tap on submit, and that student can now go into that task, that remote learning task, and mark it as done. And then the teacher is going to get a notification that 5F0001 will have done that task and that it is ready for review. And then the teacher can go and review it, and when they're finished reviewing it, so you tap on it to review it, add in your annotations and comments and whatever you want to do, review it, and then when we're done, we can go back into Schoolwork and we can tap on the three dots and return it to the student. And you could also ask your student to complete something again, because that's what this is all about, is giving students the opportunity to fail forward, to learn and to try again, and so on. So if we go back to the student's activity and we go into the Marco Polo activity and we tap start, and then they're going to answer the question, right, and tap next, and then the student goes back into this and mark as done. So now the student's able to see how they're doing, how they're progressing in terms of their work. And when the teacher goes in, they're able to go in and see what has and has not been done in terms of that quiz. And when the quiz gets closed, the teacher will get the results, and so on. And it'll just progress through all these different activities, and when the student has finished reading the novel or done anything, they can go in and mark those items as done. And we're able to see that for this particular student, they can see that they have not completed 5 of the 8 tasks inside that handout, but they've completed 3. There are 0 that they have to try again. So if a teacher wants a student to try something again, and they go, for example, to the Marco Polo quiz that we saw there, you can see that it took that student 1 minute to do it, and they got 0% for that particular quiz. So you get that feedback directly from the Kahoot app, and you want the student to try again, tap on the ellipses and ask them to try again. All right, and you can send a message with this, and the student will get the notification that the teacher wants them to try to do that quiz again. There's the notification that's popped up at the top, and then that will feed back. It'll sync through Schoolwork, sync back to the teacher, who will then see that that student tried that again and how they managed to do in the second attempt. And then we can see that we've had 2 activities to review. We have 13 that have not been completed. So now that that's been reviewed, we can just mark it as viewed, and then that is no longer an activity to be reviewed. And then you'll see I now have only 1 activity to review. All right. So we're getting some really valuable feedback in terms of how students are doing. So that is essentially how Schoolwork works. And then when you do like something and you like work, you can favorite it. You can share that entire handout with someone. So if we tap share, you can actually share it you could airdrop that entire thing to another teacher if they're wanting to use it. You could send it to someone. You can also favorite it so it becomes one of your favorites. You can create a copy of it so you could use it for in another class or something. And you can lock it. And when you lock an assignment, it just simply locks it down so students can't submit any more work. And that is one way of sticking to those deadlines, which are important in terms of teaching time management skills to students. And we're able to go in and view all the different items that we have, courses that you've created, handouts that you've made. You can create a class on the fly if you want. I hope that you will be brave enough to explore these. Again, please reach out to Lab 9 Pro should you require any support in terms of getting your managed Apple IDs sorted out, sorting out your mobile device management system, and just understanding how Schoolwork and Apple Classroom work. I do encourage you to be brave. If anything else, you can start with a Classroom. Remember, you can use that without using managed Apple IDs, but when you do get managed Apple IDs set up, it is an exceptionally powerful, amazing place to be and space to be, because of the valuable information that it provides for your students, about your students, and the safe space it gives you to be able to reach out to students and be inclusive and give that personalized learning space to all your students, and giving you the opportunity to focus on what you do best, that is your teaching, and to take away the tech strain that you might feel in other environments. Good luck and all the best, everybody.